I'm John Atack,
Yes.
and this is my lovely guest, Francis Peters, yet again. Such a delight.
Hi, John. Nice to be here again. Yeah.
And I thought we might start with something incredibly simple that would probably only take 3 or 4 years to explain. And that's this. What's wrong with the Watchtower Society? What's going on there that people should be concerned about?
Yeah, of course, there are a lot of things that you can say about the Watchtower. There's a lot of information available of people who were in and out, and then a lot of activists who are talking about the Jehovah's Witnesses as if everyone there is sort of evil.
Which is a crazy view.
Yes, it's too black and white for me. But there are many things happening there that people should know about before, because when you approach them from the outside, everything looks fine and they're just kind people, friendly people. If you can see them on the street just talking about the Watchtower or certain subjects, they seem to be very social and very kind and well-intended people who just want to share the Bible and their views, and things have changed. So in the past they were a little bit more forceful, and now they are far more relaxed and just, okay, if you don't want to talk, fine. And so it comes across as very benign, but that's the outside layer.
Yeah.
So a lot of the people who were born and raised into it, they don't know anything else, or not much of the world outside of the organization. They might be physically present in the world outside, but still are keeping themselves from really connecting with the world outside, as they call it. But there are things happening that people should know about, and that's, for instance, the position that the leaders take.
Yeah.
Because
the elders of the Watchtower.
Yeah, the elders are actually more of those are the men who actually are looking after the rank and file, so to speak. So the members.
Kind of middle management.
Exactly. So they are actually doing what the leaders are asking them to do. So they are looking. They are more like the watchdogs of the Watchtower concept.
So how is the Watchtower governed? Who's in charge?
It's a hierarchy. So you have the members, so the families who are part of it. You have the elders who take care of the congregations and everything that people would need, and then you have the preceding overseer. So you have somebody who leads the elders. You have above the elders you have the circuit overseer, and above that you have the district overseer. So you have a lot of the hierarchy goes up until the ones who are actually sitting in America, in New York, very close to New York. Yes, at the head office where these the magazines, whatever is written in the Watchtower, and all the magazines that they have and the books that they have are written there. And so there's the source of all the ideas. You have I'm just looking for the English word for it. They call themselves the faithful and discreet slave, and that is based upon a Bible text where actually there is a sort of a slave class that needs to take care of the followers of Christ. So Christ should come back, they said, in the time in the last days, and then he needs somebody who is looking after the sheep. And this faithful and discreet slave class, who's called faithful because there's also an unfaithful one who's actually not doing what Christ asked him to do. But this faithful slave is, and he's actually distributing spiritual food among those who actually want to listen to the words of Jesus. So and that faithful and discreet slave is actually became sort of a title. So it's actually a question. It's a question in that Bible verse. It's asked as a question: who is the faithful and discreet slave? And they actually are saying, well, we are. and the faithful and discreet slave, as they call themselves, are the ones that are distributing this spiritual food. And so the whole literature and everything that they are spreading in the world among their members is that spiritual food. So it's all based on that Bible text that they have the authority given by Christ to do so, and that they are actually the ones who are assigned to take that task upon them.
And how many people are there in the governing body of?
About 8.
8
yeah, nowadays it's 8, and it's at first they that slave class was more. They said it's there were more people who were part of it, not only those who were sitting in that board of men that actually are writing and saying that they were used by God as a sort of communication channel for his members.
How do you get to join that little elite club? How do you?
Oh yeah, that's something that I think if you would read Conflict of Conscience,
Ray France.
The book of Ray France, it will explain very, very well how more in detail how it works.
Yeah.
Because I don't think you can have anything that's more close to the actual experience of how it's done. So I think that would be a very good idea to read about it. But it's more of all these. The authority that they say they have is what is very, especially when you're born and raised into it, they're sort of a half god. They're sort of, like the Pope is for the Catholic Church, then this faithful and discreet slave is the authority for accepting, well, this is what God means by this verse in the Bible. And so their interpretations of what the Bible actually means and what the members actually should do is coming from them. And when a person dies, then there will be somebody else who follows, who will take their place.
And so basically the committee is self-perpetuating. They will choose a new member when one dies.
Yeah. So they
no democracy or
no, and they of course claim that it's all done because of the Holy Spirit tells them who is the person they have to choose. So it's all, of course, God through them will help them make the right decision. That's something that we hope for also in other groups, of course. So all these groups claim that God has a special place for them, and they are the ones who are actually chosen to be His people. And so, and
there are thousands of groups out there who claim to.
Yeah. So they're not alone in this. But what makes it harmful is that the authority that they say they have is a God-given authority, and people should listen. And they have about 8 million active members, so it's spread around the world, and they have a lot of influence in how people actually, of what kind of decisions people make in their personal lives. So it could even be a matter of life and death if you think about blood transfusion, or if you would think about be part of the enlist in the army or not, or being part of a political party or not being involved with politics at all. So there's all kinds of choices.
Is it true that Jehovah's Witnesses don't normally vote in elections?
Oh, not at all. No, absolutely no political activity at all. So because they think that Christ is already king for the ones that follow him. So for the true Christians, Christ is already king. So if you already have a king, you don't want any other kingdom or country or leader of that country be your leader or your authority. The only authority that you should acknowledge, they say, is Christ himself. And of course, Christ is using them to say whatever he thinks is right.
So basically, in simple terms, you do what they say.
Exactly.
Because they have the ear of the Holy Spirit and know what.
Oh yeah. Yeah, so their authority is unquestionable because of, so as soon as they can convince you of the idea that they are the ones with the authority, like with so many other groups, they can just ask you anything because they are just in God's place. They'll tell you what God wants, what he thinks, what he expects you to do, and you should do that if you want to follow God. And otherwise, you'll make God very, very upset. So that's something that is, of course, that's just a pass to ask anything you like.
So I mean, basically, they have total authority over their members.
Yes, and claim they have none.
Yeah, and when we put together the word total and the word authority, we get totalitarian.
Yes.
And that I personally wouldn't want to belong to any institute that.
Exactly, but this is very passive aggressive because it's had so many really kind and loving people in it who are very, very sincere in their attempts to really be a good person and really be a good Christian. But it's more as that they truly rely on these people to help them actually be faithful to the truth or the right interpretation of the Bible. That it's actually very, very sad to see that these kind people are being used this way.
And it's often the case with most of the extreme authoritarian sects. That's what our friend Christian calls that most of the membership are decent, kind-hearted people who really think
idealistic, really wanting to change things in the world, or really be a good person. So, and they are actually being abused on a spiritual level to do whatever the leaders want them to do. So they have, and I'm not aware of the hidden agenda behind it, that it's all about power or claiming they have authority that they have not. In reality, they don't have it. But as long as there are followers who are still giving them the authority, it seems okay. But as soon as lives are lost or there is a real problem that people, that they getting involved in their personal lives in such a way that if people don't do what they say, for instance, they make their members shun their own family, then that's very invasive. Then it's crossing a boundary. That's privacy. So
violating freedom of association, which is a right enshrined in the European Convention.
It's a universal right.
And we shouldn't interfere. I think the matter of most concern to me, the one thing that I've heard in the last 5 years since I've been talking with you and with other former members of the Watchtower, it is the child abuse situation. And what the most scary thing I read was something that Barbara Anderson had said, that there was actually a ministry going into prisons and recruiting child molesters. it's not simply that, and there was a talk of a register of some 23,000 known child molesters, and that the Watchtower Society won't give this list of offenders who have committed serious crimes against children.
Yeah.
They won't allow the police to see this, and they're not. If they're actually recruiting child molesters who are then simply forgiven and then allowed into a household with no protection. I mean, there was a case in England in 2015, I think, where the Watchtower Society was forced to pay over £300,000 because it had failed to protect a child from a known child molester.
Yeah, I don't know personally about really actively recruiting child molesters, but I know that there are child molesters among those who were recruited from the. So I don't think they specifically went for the child molesters, but
it is
they did go exactly. Yes, so in the prison there were child molesters, and the ones who said they were very, very sorry for what they did, they could have a way out just by becoming a Jehovah's Witness, a very devout, active Jehovah's Witness. And they said, well, this is also privacy, so you're not it's not okay to share these details with the members of the congregation, and they wouldn't know what kind of things they had done in the past. But yes, that's part of the problem, because healing from this, or really recover from this the harm that they do, that's just something that is heartbreaking. So to protect these people and actually not protecting the children who are in, or should be extra careful among when they get in contact with people who did that in the past. So it's all a balance of, okay, when do you need to say something and when not? And when something happens, then immediately taking action and protect the child or future potential victims.
I mean, it seems to me a dreadful conflict of ideas here. The view in contemporary psychology is very strongly that somebody who's been convicted of child molesting should not be allowed near children, because no matter what they say, there is a very strong possibility that they will repeat the offence. In fact, an incredibly strong possibility. That's not to say that child molesters cannot be healed and cannot be redeemed. I believe they can be. But there are differentiations of, the criminal psychopath who is doing this and somebody who is themselves immature and is doing it because they don't realise that it is.
Exactly. Yeah.
And if you're taking the people from the prisons, you are going to be picking up criminal psychopaths. You're going to be picking up people who are looking for every opportunity to do this. Yeah. And
it's very good in manipulating people, and that's something that in the organization of Jehovah's Witnesses, manipulation is actually a part of the whole process in the organization. So it's a part of, on one side, the emotional blackmail that's constantly going on, that people are actually activated on fear, all kinds of fear that people have, and want to make them feel guilty or obligated to do things. Well, to manipulate a person to do something, not because they want to, but because you're emotionally blackmailing them to do so. Well, in groups like this and organizations like this is just day-to-day life. And not only by using how they use their words to motivate people, but also using or abusing their authority by claiming that God is on their side, that the only true interpretation of the Bible is their interpretation. So it's just using the Bible and using God or Christ as a force that people cannot do anything against. So you have to follow. So it's not a matter of a question. It's not no discussion is possible. This is just what you have to do. So and emotional blackmail and this authority together is a very strong force. A very it feels like a pressure that you cannot get away from. So it puts you in a position that you get into survival mode, and when you're little, especially when you're born and raised into it, you don't know how to resist that and really be able to choose for yourself. So yeah.
I mean, another concern that I've often heard expressed is the attitude towards higher education among the Jehovah's Witnesses. The idea is that the world is going to end tomorrow or the day after, or pretty soon, and so there's no point becoming skillful and knowledgeable because you won't need.
Oh no, you don't need to be particularly clever or go to university, because you will only learn the ideas of the world, and the world is in the hands of Satan, so to speak. So they are, but on the other hand, they make use of the people that are very intelligent and went to university and learned their skills and science and whatever. They make use of the knowledge available because people are that clever.
And they employ quite a lot of lawyers as well.
Oh yeah, and they must have gone to university or So yeah, that's a contradiction. Yeah.
But the technological world, therefore, from that perspective, is corrupt. That technology is the work of the devil, and that you shouldn't therefore train as an engineer or.
No, I don't even think it's so hard to put your finger on it, because on the other hand they love the whole modern things that are available and make use of it. So they're not like the Amish that don't make use of modern technology. They like to make use of it and actually be the first ones that actually use it and say, well, as they can claim it, and say, we almost invented it, or it's a God-given thing. But it's obvious in hindsight. It's very obvious to see that it's all about control. So if you would go to university and learn about evolution, oh my God, that's dangerous. Or learn about how to think critically, or just to know. To learn and grow and develop as a human being and see things from all different perspectives. That's, of course, a danger for a group that wants to control people. So they want to control their behavior. You can't go to meetings 3 times a week, or nowadays it's 2 times a week. You can't go to meetings and spend your time there if you constantly have to learn or teach, and so it takes a lot of your time, hobbies, things like that, all take time and energy. You don't have it, they say. You don't need to spend it in this world because God's day is just around the corner. So it just keeps you away from developing and enjoying things that actually would distract you from working for the organization and preaching and associate only with members.
I mean, I've been aware of the Jehovah's Witnesses, the Watchtower Society, since I was a teenager, when 2 of my friends, sadly, were lured in, 2 talented young men whose lives could have amounted to a great deal more.
Yeah.
One of them was a particularly talented guitar player, and he had to stop doing that. In fact, they were both guitar players, and they both were forced to stop doing that. But while I've been aware of it, over this time, it's always been repulsive to me, because whenever I see a piece of Watchtower literature, with the tigers lying down with the lambs in this kind of Disney world,
it's sort of a paradise picture they want to paint,
really just the last place that I would want to spend time, frankly. It looks incredibly boring.
Yeah.
Okay, well, moving on swiftly. And I suppose that, the Jehovah's Witnesses are famous for shunning, for disfellowshipping, for ostracizing members. And I think it's very difficult for outsiders to understand. I mean, my involvement with Scientology, my mum followed me in to see if it was safe for me to do. I didn't recruit her. She came in, and I was down in the south of England and she was in the Midlands, and she went and she spent 8 years involved with it. And when somebody said, I started asking questions, and somebody said to her, what will you do if John is declared a suppressive person, as they so kindly put it? And that day, once the question was asked, she left. She said, the fact that such a question would be asked means I'm in a bad organization if it would try and split up families. So for me, it was never a personal issue. And then I started meeting people who were staying inside Scientology and coming and talking to me, but they were staying inside because they had a spouse who was devoted to it. And, then I came to meet people who were part of the next generation, who realized that if they left, then nobody in their family, their parents, their siblings, would talk to them. And that, to me, that's what marks a group that we need to be concerned about. Any group,
they can't stand in between family members. That's just wrong.
And it's something that happened. I mean, I said before, I think when we were talking before, I was in St. Petersburg, and a man of about 35 years old told me that his mum and dad hadn't spoken to him for 2 or 3 years. And it really hit me. It was sort of your parents have a duty to you. I have 4 children. I would never imagine not being there to talk with them, to help them if I can, because they are flesh of my flesh. They are part of me. So the idea that an organisation can interfere with that, to me, is absolutely cool.
And then even say, well, we didn't force you to do that, because it's actually your fault because you left the organisation. So it's not us making the choice; it's you making the choice. So they constantly.
It'll be your fault if I shoot the hostage.
Exactly. So they just walk away from the responsibility for encouraging people, or actually, it sounds like encouraging, but it's actually a hidden threat. So it's very passive aggressive. So they would say in your face, yes, we're all about love, and all the whole shunning, that's just, it's an act of love. They literally say in the literature that it's an act of love to shun, because it is to make them feel sorry for what they did and come back to the organization, be part of it again. So if you want to be part of the family again, they said you would not, the thing they say, well, that really hit me. During a district convention, they even told active members, would you like to have it on your conscience if you make contact with your child who already left the organization? You should shun, that you make contact with them, and they, because of that, don't feel the need to come back to the organization. So by dividing and actually tell them, you should shun them if you love them, because then they will come back to Jehovah, as they call God, to Jehovah and to the organization, and be safe during God's judgment day. So if you don't shun them, that's because you actually don't love them.
Yes.
And that's something that really hit me, as if that's not harmful, what is? So to stand in between parents and children and siblings and even just little children that don't want to see their mother because she's no longer a Jehovah's Witness. And they really feel that their mother or father did a really bad thing, and they are in the hands of the devil. So they are becoming afraid of them, to see them, because they will lure them back into the world or make them a bad person. And those things are really, for me, is crossing a boundary in what you are allowed to say. You cannot interfere in these private matters.
I had a situation some years ago where a man was seeking better contact with his children, and the mother was in Scientology, and there were 3 children under the age of 10. And one day these children went to their father. I only met the guy twice, but one day these children went to their father and said, we don't love you and we don't want to see you anymore. Now, 3 children under the age of 10.
Yeah, that's
evidently been told.
They don't come up with that themselves.
That night, the man was hanged. The next day, he was found dead.
Yeah.
And messing with people's relationships in that way is it's a deplorable activity. It really is.
Absolutely, and I think it's one of the causes why it regularly happens that a former Jehovah's Witness who is shunned this way can't cope with it and takes their own life.
Yes,
that it happens regularly, and well, if that's the effect of being part of an organization and not agreeing with them anymore, well, that sounds truly as cult behavior.
And it has nothing whatsoever to do with love.
No. And I think that's why it hurt me so much, that when they say this just from a stage or giving a talk where thousands of people are there with their families and little children and grandparents, they're all together there as one huge picnic, sitting there and drinking coffee and eating their meals, and then just as if it is just a casual conversation about, well, we have to warn you, and then with a smile on their face, be the loving person and shun your child. Well, it's I can't get it. It's something that even when I was part of the organization, because that has to be said, I was part of it until I was in my 40s and born and raised into it. And when I was asked to shun my own family, I didn't. Because I thought, well, the other family members who were there, it was my brother-in-law, I thought, well, but my sister is not disfellowshipped. Her children are not disfellowshipped. Should I now just stay away from that place because my brother-in-law thinks differently? I'm not going to talk with him about religion or other things. I just want to see my sister.
Yeah.
So I just ignored the whole thing. So I know there are also people who do that, just don't talk about it if you do it.
Yeah.
And so it's, I know that there are emails written that's not allowed actually to write an email or a WhatsApp message or not using a mobile phone, calling them. So that's all not allowed. That's all seen as making contacts, and that keeps them from coming back to the organization.
Yeah.
So that they make people feel guilty about it. Well, it's actually a natural way of expressing your love and wanting to know if the other person is okay.
Yeah.
And to actively make them feel guilty and very afraid of that God will not forgive them if they would do that. That's really, if we're talking about coercive behavior, well, that's really a big one.
Yeah, and I think the interference with people's communication, we talk about gatekeeping, where there's information control, what you're allowed know and not know from the outside. But there's also this absolute control of communication where you'll be told what you can and can't say, what you can and can't think. And the idea that, the devil's going to lure you away if you dare to think about certain things. I must say that I don't think I've ever suffered from information. I don't think I've ever suffered from communication because I've not been talked into doing things that you know, I've been very lucky in that regard, I suppose, but there's never been sufficient pressure, you know, upon me for me to, you know, I don't look back at my life and go, oh, I wish I hadn't done that. You know, I mean, I sometimes regret having spent 12 years of my life talking about Scientology because it was a pretty difficult time.
Yeah.
But I don't regret it in terms of the consequences, which is that, you know, many people were able to find out something they didn't know about Ron Hubbard and Scientology.
Exactly. You gave it meaning.
Yeah, and the, you know, the thought that I'm not grown up enough to determine who I can and can't talk with is positively insulting. And when I hear about some of the, you know, these little tribunals that are held in the Jehovah's Witnesses when, you know, 3 elders will sit down and decide what you're meant to do. And these elders don't actually have any understanding of psychology. They don't have any understanding.
It's just a judicial committee. They call themselves a judicial committee, but it's just men that have just normal jobs.
Yeah.
It's got nothing to do with being a judge or a lawyer or a psychologist or somebody who knows about human behavior in a healthy way. So that's not what they know about coercion. Yes, they know about emotional blackmail. Yes, they would not call it that. They will call it good intentions, and call it. But we know more about the Bible. Yes, the interpretation of the Watchtower. So it's they know how to enforce the rules that they get from higher up, from the hierarchy. They know how to enforce it. And how to make sure that everybody is listening to these rules. And if they're not, well, then we have to think about it, that so that person is actually will not repent. And if they would not repent, then we have to tell them that they will be disfellowshipped with all the consequences with it. So the person who knows that will going to happen will be very, very careful not to show to anyone what's actually going on. So the result is that there are lots of people part of that organization who think differently but will act as if they think just the same. So but that's what happens if you don't let people just free and think what they want to think, and just stop punishing them as if you're a god.
I mean, and I see it as a father, that when many years ago, my oldest boy has just turned 35, but when he was at university, he rang me up and asked me, he was at a party and he'd been offered a drug, and he rang up and asked whether he should take it, and it was methamphetamine, and I said absolutely not. No. And he didn't take it. But I felt very gratified by that my approach to parenting has always been, what's the problem and how can I help? Rather than stop doing that, you know.
Yeah, or threatening with something, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm happy to report that I have 4 highly intelligent, responsible, and, you know, sociable, personable children. They're not scared of the world. They're not.
Who feel free to just express themselves and share what they think without being punished for it. Yeah. That's how I know your sons. Yeah.
Thank you. First of all, that you know, right from the beginning, I've sought to teach them that it's absolutely fine to disagree with me.
Yeah.
About anything. I won't have. You know, nobody gets to scream and shout at me, but they don't. It's not the way it is. We talk about things, and if I'm wrong, then my position has to be, I'm wrong, and you know, you've helped me to understand better, and they all do. They all.
Yeah, that's just an interesting discussion to see things from different sides.
Yeah, rather than this kind of authoritarian, I'm the parent, you're the child, which is the way that authoritarians work. That they think that they understand the world better. And
they treat them as children. They treat them as little children who are not capable of thinking on their own, but want to give the impression that they actually making the choice themselves. And that's exactly how grooming works.
Yep.
Yes, that you actually want to give the person the idea that the choice is theirs, but they actually lure you into a decision that you, in hindsight, think, how came this about? Why? Even when you're looking backwards, or you're looking in hindsight, then you'll see how this decision came about, and it's, oh my God, and even feel guilty about making it, not realizing you were coerced into that decision.
And when we look at these holier than thou leaders, these slaves, as they call themselves, we've had many examples over the years of the moral turpitude, the dreadful behaviour of people like Swaggart or Jim Baker, for example, who were spending, large amounts of money on going to prostitutes while exhorting everybody else to be faithful in their marriages.
And then cry about it and say, well, I'm so sorry. God must forgive me.
Please don't stop sending the money.
And they send more money.
They do.
Yeah.
Because Jesus said that if you would follow me, you have to give up all that you own to the poor.
Yeah.
Unless, of course, you're a prosperity Christian, in which case it's fine. Okay. On that point, is there any tithing in the Watchtower? Do members pay a tithe?
No, they don't. For some, it's 1 out of 10 they have to give. But with Jehovah's Witnesses, is more about it's volunteer.
Okay.
Voluntarily, but there is pressure. So there are talks given about giving voluntarily and why it's necessary. So where the money is for, but they will not tell them that the money they are using is for the, how do you call it, the courts of the things.
Legal, massive legal expenses.
Exactly. Yeah.
Are the leadership, humble, and do they wear sackcloth and ashes and buy their clothes from thrift stores, or do they?
No, there is a code. There is a code that they have to be official clothes, so it has to be a suit. So men are wearing more, especially when they're elders and they have a position in the organization. They should be an example, so they need official clothes, but they don't have special clothes.
No. Okay. Well, this has been absolutely fascinating. Thank you very much, Frances. And
you're very welcome.
We will talk again very soon indeed. Thank you.
Okay.